In the winter of 1959, the northern Ural Mountains were a pitch-black, frozen void. On the slopes of Kholat-Syakh, known to the indigenous Mansi people as Dead Mountain, temperatures regularly plummeted to -40 degrees Celsius. Igor Dyatlov led a team of 9 hikers into this wilderness to achieve the highest level of Soviet mountaineering certification. These were elite survivalists and hardened athletes, highly capable individuals trained to thrive in conditions that would kill an amateur in hours. But when searchers reached the campsite weeks later, they found a scene of absolute chaos. The team's tent had been sliced open from the inside and abandoned in a hurry. Footprints showed the hikers fleeing into the dark wearing only socks or underwear, sprinting away from their only source of shelter. The subsequent autopsies only deepened the mystery. While 6 of the hikers died from exposure, 3 others suffered massive blunt force trauma. Their shattered ribs and fractured skulls were comparable to the impact of a high-speed car crash. Even more macabre was the lack of any struggle. Despite missing eyes and tongues on some of the victims, there were no signs of a fight, no animal tracks, and no other human footprints in the snow. For 60 years, these details fueled rumors of supernatural monsters and secret military weapons. But the true killers were entirely natural, the product of invisible, brutal forces of extreme mountain physics. To solve the case, we have to address a core forensic question. What invisible threat could cause a group of expert survivalists to slash their own tent and run to their deaths in a blizzard? The topography of Dead Mountain is unique. It forms a symmetrical dome, an isolated peak exposed to powerful, laminar winter winds. This creates a specific aerodynamic profile that interacts with the wind in a lethal way. As gale force winds whip past the mountain, the air layers separate and roll up into discrete, alternating vortices. This creates a Kármán vortex street, a repeating pattern of swirling air currents shedding downstream from the peak. This continuous vortex shedding generates high-amplitude infrasound at 18 Hz. This is a frequency just below the limit of human hearing, meaning the hikers couldn't hear the sound, but their bodies could feel it. The human eyeball has a natural resonant frequency of 18 Hz. Exposure to these waves causes the eye to vibrate, blurring vision and creating flickering optical illusions in the periphery. Simultaneously, the infrasound stimulates the inner ear, inducing motion sickness and a massive spike in the stress hormone cortisol. Sitting in the pitch blackness of their tent, the hikers were subjected to hours of this exposure. Their brains were receiving primal, unavoidable signals of an immense, invisible danger that they could sense but never identify. Before a single blow was ever struck, the hikers' minds were already unraveling from hours of silent, acoustic torture. Infrasound can induce terror, but it doesn't break bones. This leads to the second mystery. How did they sustain car crash levels of trauma on a slope historically considered too flat for an avalanche? When the hikers cut into the snow to pitch their tent, they unknowingly set a mechanical trap. This excavation destabilized a weak foundational layer of snow known as depth hoar, which acts like a slippery, unstable base for the layers above. For the next 9 hours, powerful katabatic winds silently deposited headed layers of fresh snow directly above the campsite. This increased the shear stress on that weak depth hoar layer until the snowpack reached a critical breaking point. This triggered a delayed slab avalanche. A dense, hard block of snow, roughly the size of an SUV, detached from the slope and dropped directly onto the tent. The trauma was exceptionally severe because the hikers were sleeping on their rigid skis to insulate themselves from the ground. The heavy ice block acted like a hydraulic press, crushing their chests and skulls against the unyielding surface of their gear. Already gripped by infrasound-induced panic, met with a deafening crack and a sudden crushing weight. Convinced the mountain was collapsing, they slashed the tent open, dragged out their dying friends, and fled into the storm. The remaining mysteries are explained by grim biology. The freezing cold likely induced paradoxical undressing. a hypothermic state where the brain misinterprets freezing temperatures as intense heat, causing victims to discard their clothes. Any missing soft tissue was the result of opportunistic animal scavengers found in the Urals. Fluid dynamics and localized snow mechanics aligned with lethal precision that night, creating a tragedy that requires no supernatural explanation. The ultimate tragedy is that the hikers didn't make a foolish mistake. They executed a textbook emergency evacuation, fleeing a perceived avalanche zone for the shelter of the tree line. They did everything their training required, but they were simply outmatched. The wilderness does not need monsters or government conspiracies to be terrifying. Nature is an indifferent machine, capable of crushing both the human mind and body through the simple application of physical laws. Dead Mountain remains unchanged. The winds howl, the infrasound hums, and under the right conditions, the mountain will gladly do it all again.